Have you been going into races with all-wheel drive swap builds because every single time you tried a rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive car, you either end up crashing into the outside wall leading to that dreaded slowdown, or even though you tried your absolute best to maintain control, you just went on the power too much too soon and you spun out? Well, stick around, I might be able to help you out. What's up my fellow racers? It's Shinny, your favorite racing reaper, back with the next part of the tutorial series for Forza Horizon 5, and in this video I'm going to be discussing the next step in tuning, and this is everything that deals with tuning your differentials and braking for any road racing situation. So let's not delay and jump straight into it. I just need to put a few disclaimers out there. Firstly, this video is pulling info from part 4 and you need to have watched that first in order to watch this video. There may be some info that was discussed over there, and for the sake of everybody's time, I do not want to repeat things. And again, if you haven't watched the rest of the series, I urge you to go and watch it, because this whole guide works together and I don't want you to be in the dark about anything. The next thing is that I will not be taking you guys through a full tuning process, but I will show you guys what the wrong settings can do to the car versus the right settings. So firstly, before I deep dive into how the tuning works, let's quickly go over why you need to tune your differential and brakes. Now remember, this is specifically for a road racing situation. Your car has an engine, as you can see over there, and along the line it's connected to the differential. That is one of the middlemen parts between your engine and your driving wheels. The purpose of your differential is to control the difference in speed on your driving wheels by splitting the amount of torque that's sent between those wheels on that axle. The purpose of your brakes is to slow the car down to the right speed whenever you're going into a corner. But with this, you have to keep in mind that weight shifting comes into play, and that is why you need to tune your differential and braking in tandem so that the whole car works how you want it to. The next thing I need to go over is what telemetry readouts will we need to pay attention to in order to tune our differential and braking. For differential tuning, you'll need to pay attention to the tire's miscellaneous screen, and what you're going to be looking at is the speed readouts, but that's depending on what drivetrain your car has. Although if you have an all-wheel drive car, just focus on one axle at a time, so you would focus on the rear first and then the front. For braking, you'll need to pay attention to your tire's heat screen, and you're going to be looking specifically at the front tire's heat. There's also a double check that you can do using the suspension screen. There's also some car behaviors that you'll need to look out for. I'm going to explain all of this as it needs to be through the different points in the video, okay? Now, when we look specifically at a road racing situation, you need to remember that you are aiming to tune for grip, and the surface that you are working with has a lot of friction. So you generally want a more open differential because of this. So with that said, you need to optimize your differential and braking in tuning in order to get 4 things right. And we'll firstly look at 2 of the 4 things which deal with the car being in a state of acceleration. And this is where the differential accel percentage that you see in the tuning menu will come into play. One quick point I want to mention though, these percentages that you see represent how much lock the differential will apply in terms of the torque being split between the driving wheels, or the rate at which the differential will start to apply the same speed between each driving wheel. The higher this percentage, the faster the driving wheels will start to spin at the same speed, and vice versa. The first thing is that when your car is accelerating in a straight line, you need both your driving wheels to be spinning at the same speed or as close to the same speed as much as possible. Doing so will help the car with straight line stability, and it will also increase acceleration. So in order to do this, you will need to adjust the axle percentage by increasing it to make the driving wheels spin at the same speed sooner rather than later. The second thing is from mid-corner to corner exit. When your car is going through a corner and you begin accelerating out of it, you need your driving wheels to be spinning at enough of a different speed, because your outside wheels actually travel at a greater distance than your inside wheel. So your outside wheel needs to be allowed to go faster than your inside wheel. Allowing this to happen will actually let the car have more stability during corner exit. This is where you would decrease the axle percentage in tuning to do the opposite of what I said earlier. You would need your driving wheels to stay spinning at a different speed for longer rather than start spinning at the same speed sooner. Now let's look at the next two of the four things that you need to get right with your differential tuning. And this is where your brake tuning comes into play, because this deals with your car being in a state of deceleration. And you guessed it, the differential decel percentage in the tuning menu is also going to come into play here. The first thing is corner entry, and you have to bring your braking into the equation with this. You need to have your differential set correctly so that when you slam the brakes, your car doesn't break traction and it can maintain stability during corner entry. This is where you would increase the differential decel percentage in order to hold the car along the line that you want to follow at the beginning of a corner. The second thing is that when you let off the throttle in the middle of a corner, your car's weight will be shifted over entirely to the outside of the car. And with that, the differential needs to maintain the right speeds between your driving wheels in order for you to hold the line that you want to take during the middle of a corner. This is where you would decrease the decel percentage to hold the line during the middle of the corner when you off the throttle. So you can see that there is a balance setting that you would need to find for your differential between being in a state of acceleration and deceleration. And you should also know that there is a relationship between these two settings, because your differential is one part. As you make an adjustment to your axle percentage, you will need to make an adjustment to your decel percentage as well. And there's no definite formula for this. You're gonna need to fine-tune both of them in order to get the car to work the way you want it. Let's say you decreased your axle percentage in order for your car to be more stable during corner exit. You might find that your decel percentage is now too high and your car doesn't want to turn in as much during corner entry and doesn't want to hold the line in mid-corner, and you're going to need to decrease this as well. Now let's quickly take a look at your brake settings and how these will affect the car. Your brakes will need to be set correctly for two things alongside your differential decel percentage, and these are stability and stopping power. When it comes to setting up your car for stability under braking, you will need to set your braking balance up correctly so that the weight of your car shifts over to the front wheels. All so you can get the max grip from your front tires, because those are the tires that your car turns with after all. However, if you shift your braking balance too far to the front, you could end up making the rear lose traction and your car will lose stability at this point. If you shift your braking balance to the rear, you're going against the laws of physics, and that's going to work against you. You also need to take your car's weight distribution into account for this. If your car has more weight at the front of it, you will need to shift your braking balance as far front as possible to allow the rear to actually shift that weight forward as well. If your car has more weight at the rear of it, then you would need to keep a more centered braking balance, because that rearward weight bias can act as a pendulum when you go under heavy braking, and if your brakes are shifted too far to the front, your tail could swing out, and that can cause a lot of trouble for you during a race, making it very hard for you to actually drive the car. Just remember that the UI in the tuning menu actually has things swapped around. So where it says it's front, that's actually the rear, and where it says rear, that's actually the front. The second thing that you need to get right with your brake settings is your stopping power. There is one other element that comes into play here, and that is whether or not you have your ABS assist turned on or off. But you do want to see one basic outcome. When you drop the anchors, what you want to see is that the wheels do not lock up for an extended period of time, and this is something around 1.5 seconds. But you also want the car to be able to slow down in time in order for you to have the right speed, whether it's for corner entry or even if you're just trying to maintain your speed through the corner. Now, I need to add that if your weight distribution affects your braking balance, then the weight of the car is going to affect how much braking force you're going to need. A heavier car will require more braking force and a lighter car is going to require less. You should generally increase your braking force if your wheels do not lock up under braking, but you are not slowing down enough in order for you to take the corner at the right speed. However, if you notice that your wheels are already locking up under braking without even increasing it, then you should decrease your braking pressure so that your wheels do not lock up under braking and that you do slow down in order to go through the corner at the right speed. Now, through all of this, you have to keep in mind that there is this sort of quadrisect that goes with how your differential and your braking works together. And here's it here. So your diff accel percentage affects your diff decel percentage, as I explained earlier. That in turn works together with your brake bias for stability, and your brake bias actually works together with your brake force, because if you set your brake bias incorrectly in one direction or the other and you set your force too high, then you could end up with some serious stability issues. So next up, I'm gonna jump into Forza Horizon 5 and I'm gonna take you guys through the 2 tracks that I use to test and tune my differential and braking settings. And after that, I'm also going to show you guys how good settings work and how bad settings actually look like when you're actually tuning and looking at what to sort out with the car. Alright, now let's go through the first track that I use, and that is Los Jardines circuit. This track features a good mix of slower, sharper corners and faster, easier corners. There is specific behaviors from the car that I look for at each corner though, and to begin, let's use the Nismo 370Z, which we all know is a rear wheel drive car. Alright, the first thing I am looking for is straight from the start to the first corner, which is a left-hander, and I use this gap in the bushes as my brake marker. And if I cannot slow the car down in time for the corner, that would mean that my brakes are not strong enough. The next thing is this next set of corners going to the left, and I want to take all these corners as one corner and I want to go flat out through both of them. And if I detect any loss in traction, I look at which wheel has broken traction based on the skid marks on the ground and the final outcome in terms of oversteer or understeer. You can use the speed telemetry readout in the tires miscellaneous screen to help you see which driving wheel is breaking traction, and this would be shown by the driving wheel that is spinning faster. If I see that the outside driving wheel has broken traction, then that would tell me that I have too little differential lock under the axle percentage. If I see the inside driving wheel is breaking traction, then that would tell me the opposite. I have too much differential lock under the axle percentage. After this, I go through the next set of corners, paying attention to see if the car has that oversteer or understeer behavior while I am on the throttle until this 90-degree right-hander. And this is where everything needs to be tested between the braking and the differential. Now, because of the flow of the track, it makes it easy enough to see when the car's weight has been stabilized after the previous corner, and that is when I drop anchors. If the car doesn't slow down in time, I have too little braking force. If the car starts to break traction, my braking balance is not set right, but remember that the differential also plays a part in this. If I see that the car starts to oversteer while braking, then my braking balance is set too far to the front or my decel percentage is set too low. If I am getting understeer while braking, then my braking balance is not front enough or my decel percentage is set too high. I use the tires heat screen to tell me whether it is the braking balance or not. If I see that the front tires are heating up, then that means my braking balance is set to the front enough. The double check measure I was talking about when using the suspension screen is where I would check to see how much weight is shifting forward and if it is moving the exact opposite weight from the back, and this would help me dial in that last bit of proper braking balance, because remember, the weight distribution of the car would affect this. Once you dial in your braking balance, you can rule it out as a cause and focus more on your decel percentage, and remember that you can use the car's behavior to judge things as well. So if you're trying to rule out the brakes as a cause, check to see if you are getting any wheel lock under braking. If you see one particular set of wheels like the front or the rear wheels locking up, then that is your braking balance being set with too much of a bias to that set of wheels and you need to dial it back a bit. Coming out of this corner, I pay attention to the same things that I did at the beginning of the course, where I tried to go through that first bit of corners flat out, and then I come to this sort of lengthy U-turn corner, and this has a dip on the inside which makes things really interesting. This dip will help me test whether my axle percentage is too high, and this is specifically for a rear wheel drive car, just to remind everyone. What I look for is based on whether the car breaks traction, but there is only one outcome here with a rear wheel drive car, and that is oversteer. If I see any bit of that, then that would tell me that the axle percentage is too high. After this, I go through the rest of the course, paying attention to the behavior of the car and making sure it doesn't do any of the stuff I mentioned previously. I'll do as many runs as I need to until the car can run smoothly. Right now, let's take a quick look at a front wheel drive car and what issues can come up. Back at the beginning of the track now, and the same thing would apply with the braking not being strong enough, but when it comes to accelerating after that and taking the next bit of corners flat out, this is where front wheel drive cars are very different. At first I couldn't believe it because it didn't make sense, but I sat to think about this and it started to actually click in my head. So what I'm talking about is that front wheel drive cars actually prefer more closed differentials under acceleration, or in other words, they prefer a very high axle percentage, not completely locked to 100%, but very high. And a lot of guides actually recommend this, but I could never understand why, but I'm gonna explain it to you now. You see, the weight shifting comes into play yet again. When accelerating through a corner, remember that the outside rear tire has all the weight on it, which would mean that the inside front tire has a lot of weight lifted off of it. This would mean that while accelerating through a corner, the inside tire is the side with the least amount of resistance, and the differential will send more torque to this tire, and in doing so, it makes it spin up and break traction, and with the front wheel drive braking traction, all you get is understeer. Now back to why I couldn't believe this. Normally an open differential on a tarmac is suitable for tighter cornering to allow the speed difference between the inside and the outside wheel to be big enough that the outside wheel spins faster. But unfortunately that's not the case with a front wheel drive car, and you cannot make it behave like that either. But you can compensate for it in tuning, increasing the amount of lock to make sure the driving wheels spin at the same speed faster on a front wheel drive car when coming out of a corner actually makes the car more stable, and it helps with avoiding braking traction as much as possible. And if you still have any undesirable effects, just remember that you have your toe and caster angles to help you out. When it comes to braking, it's very similar to a rear wheel drive car though, and the same kind of corrective measures will apply, where if you notice the car doesn't want to turn in as much or is understeering while braking, then your braking balance is not set correctly, or your differential decel percentage is set too high, and vice versa if the car oversteers while braking. And trust me, front wheel drive cars can oversteer. Finally, let's take a quick look at all wheel drive cars, and this is basically a combination of the two, where you are looking to set the cars up the same way as a rear wheel drive and front wheel drive car as one. But before I go on to that, there is one extra setting here, and that is the center differential, which controls the split of torque between the front and rear differentials. Normally one would assume that 50% would be balanced, but not when it comes to fine-tuning a car, because you need to take the car's weight distribution into account. There is actually a range where the torque would be split evenly versus the torque being more forward or more rearward, and here is how you find it. You need a section of road where it's flat, hold the handbrake, bring up the revs and just launch the car. Pay attention to whether all wheels are spinning at launch or just the front or the rear. Then shift the distribution to the rear or the front bit by bit to find that point where it will be the rear or the front wheels getting more torque respectively based on which wheel is spinning first. This will help you determine the range of balanced torque distribution that you have to play with, and after that you just adjust it based on your preference. If you want more oversteer, then you should send more torque to the back, and oversteer will actually help you with staying turned into a corner. If you want more understeer, then send more torque to the front, and this will help with high speed stability. But honestly speaking, you should favor a more balanced or a more rearward torque distribution. And remember, you have your alignment and tire pressures to help you with dialing in the handling of your car, especially your toe angles. After this, you pay attention to the same things that I discussed earlier in the video for both rear wheel drive and front wheel drive cars. But my best advice, like I said earlier, is to do this based on one axle at a time. So you could focus on the front first and then the rear, for example. and use the car's behavior and telemetry screens to help you out with this. If you were to see the car doing a one wheel peel, check which wheel is breaking traction, and based on what I discussed for both front wheel drive and rear wheel drive, you would know which differential setting to adjust. When the car can run the entire loss hardiness circuit as smooth as possible while allowing me to be fast and follow the line I want to take through the whole track, then that would let me know that the car has been set up properly in this first test, which focuses more on cornering at low and medium speed corners with the one high speed corner. The second track is lookout circuit, and this track features high speed corners and a hairpin, but what is unique about it is that this track has a lot of undulation. When there is another factor that affects the way the weight of the car shifts around, such as undulations in the road, then there is a chance that the car could break traction in that situation. The other thing I look at is the long right-hander, because this is a slightly higher speed corner, and not forgetting the length of it, because this will really put the differential to the test in terms of whether the car can stay turned in without any oversteer, or if it just washes out to the outside because of understeer. And I am still looking for the same behaviors from the car though, just like I did on loss hardiness circuit, and there may be some minor adjustments to be made here as well, just to make the car be an all-rounder for any road-based track. Now, I was going to show all of you a proper clean lap around loss hardiness and lookout circuit, but that would have made the video unnecessarily long, so I am trusting you guys to have the track knowledge of these tracks, where you would know the racing lines, or any track for that matter, as long as they meet the same criteria. One track should feature low and medium speed corners with more flat surfaces, and another track should feature longer, higher speed corners with undulations in the road. One major thing I want to mention here is that there are times where you may need to go back to the upgrade stage of your build, because you may have installed something that can cause an imbalance with the car in some way. So let's say you notice some understeer that you cannot tune out. Go back to your upgrades and perhaps review what front track width you went with, or the tire width. I won't go into too much detail because I did discuss this in part 3, and unfortunately you are going to have to experiment with your build to some degree in order to get things 100% to your spec. The point is, tuning will only do so much based on the platform that you are tuning with. So if you get the right platform to work with from the beginning, your tuning process will be a lot easier, and in turn your experience with the car during a race will be a whole lot better. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to drop a like, and also if you have any questions or any comments, let me know in the comment section down below, or join the Discord server from the link in the description and let's have a chat. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, this is Shini signing off. Reaper out.